Good morning and welcome to today's episode of Men Empowerment Program, still being organized and sponsored by the Rule of Law and Empowerment Initiative, also known as Partners West Africa Nigeria P1. I am still your host for the show, Nkem Okereke, with my co-host, Ijoma Igwe. For today, we'll be discussing a topic that has been on the lips of people in recent times, and that is creating a safe space for women in the workplace. And today is so spectacular because we are having our very first male guest for the program. He is a development expert, an advocate for women's empowerment, and currently the country director of CARE International. We'll go on a short break now and then come back with our guest.
Welcome back to the show. Our guest for today is also a global justice activist with a significant presence in African society space. He has contributed significantly to African and Nigerian development policy, environment, and state institutional strengthening. He holds a PhD in political science from Bayero University, Kano, Nigeria, and is also a leading voice on the challenges of poverty, inequality, and exclusion in Africa. Please welcome with us this morning Dr. Hussaini Abdu. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
It's good to have you today, sir. Welcome.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So we'll go on to ask you the question.
Okay.
We want to find out from you, what does it mean to have a safe space for women in the working environment?
Yeah, actually the concept of safe space is largely also defined by the circumstances that women found themselves in the larger society. Okay. And so because the larger society is structured in a manner that it largely favors men, and that women are generally perceived, if not conceived, as second class within the larger society. And so sometimes people take the practices of the larger society to the workplace. And so the major characteristics that you see is the voicelessness of women, the discrimination that you see in the larger society also express themselves in the workplace, and then abuses that sometimes manifest in the larger societies are also expressed in the workplace. But if you want to make the workplace a bit more accommodating, more acceptable, more engaging, and provide voice for women, then you need a safe space for them. So the safe space for women is that platform that is provided exclusively for women to have conversations around their issues and how the workplace affects them, impacts them, and what the workplace needs to do for them to become more inclusive within the workplace. Yeah.
Okay. So I would go with, can you give us like example of what these safe spaces can be?
Okay. Many times people think the safe space is a physical space. They think it's one structure where women occupy. No, it's not necessarily a physical space, but it often requires that physical space so that women can be able to meet occasionally to have conversations on their issue, and then that meeting should be very exclusive and also empowering. So they don't need like an office, a physical office where they will meet, but the office will need to provide a space where they can meet without any interferences, conference room, meeting rooms, and whatever. But they have a standard decisions in terms of how they want to meet, how many hours they want to meet, and what issues they need to discuss. And then their conversations need to be slightly different from the organizational hierarchy, where you have the executive director or the country director and all that. No, the hierarchy shouldn't be there, so that any woman within that office setting actually able to express their voice on what affects them.
Okay, thank you very much. So why do you think this safe space for women is important?
It is extremely important if we have to strengthen the voices of women in the workplace. Because, like I mentioned, in the larger society, it is such a very domineering one, and sometimes, like described, it can also be very oppressive. You don't want to take that to the workplace. And there are a lot of things happening in the workplace these days, or rather that has been happening, but now are attracting major local and international attention. Sexual harassment and exploitation is one of the major workplace issues. Discrimination in terms of job placement and promotion, or sometimes using policies to obstruct women's both social and biological needs and processes. For instance, women not being allowed to get pregnant in some certain workplace because they are women, or they give them time, or if you recruit you need to guarantee that for 5 years you are not going to get pregnant, or if you have to marry, then you have to notify us. So people are using the social and biological structures or composition of a woman to discriminate against them in the workplace. Or you have maternity leave, and then like it happens in the banks, and I want to be very specific about them because I'm very concerned about it. Standard by law, you have to take 3 months maternity leave. That's the minimum. I run organizations where we take 6 months maternity leave, but banks will not give you more than 1 month maternity leave. So and that is a problem. So if women are not able to discuss their issue, these are the trade union matters. Unions can support that. But unions are largely led also by men. Yes, true. So the system is already rigged against women. They will not understand those peculiarities and, of women. So women can discuss their issue. And then there are certain issues of abuses, whether it's sexual harassment and exploitation, that actually have to do with power relations in the workplace. So the woman is not able to say anything. But having a platform involving other women provides that kind of solidarity for the woman. And therefore they are able to say their minds, they are able to express themselves, and therefore their issues are articulated and presented to the leadership of the organization to respond. But one thing we also need to note is that discrimination against women, even in the workplace, is not necessarily carried out only by men. Even women could actually be involved in that process. And that is why when you are setting up a safe space for women, you need to also invest in educating women and building capacity on a safe space and how space are managed, so that you are able to create a sense of equality even amongst the women out there. So that it doesn't be that, look, you have a male ED, and then a young person in that space complained, and then the next moment probably the HR is a woman and she's in that platform, and then she takes it to that person, and then now it's used against this woman. So you need to create that atmosphere that people or the women collectively own that space and are able to express themselves.
When you were talking initially, you mentioned something about empowerment of women. So I want to ask you, what roles do you think safe spaces play in the empowerment of women? Can you enlighten us more on that?
You know, one major thing in the empowerment of women is their voice.
Okay.
And then, and not the voice to sing, and the melodies that comes from that. Sometimes when we talk voice, people get very simplistic. I think voice here actually means that capacity to express themselves. That, you know, sometimes in certain settings, you know, or some settings, there's a feeling that women can only be seen, they can't be heard. And that is what needs to be broken. And that's a fundamental element in women's empowerment. So the voice could lead to both economic and the political environment. That cannot express herself can actually not grow and support herself economically. The same thing that cannot express herself can also not be able to articulate and expand her own political interest. So women's empowerment is that collective actions that is taken to strengthen the space of women in the society and fight against discriminations against them. So all those discriminatory practices, there is no society in this world. This is not an African thing, it's not a Nigerian thing. The challenges of women and the discrimination is a global phenomenon. It's just that the depth of that differs depending on society. Some societies have made more progress than the others in this issue. So when we talk about empowerment, we're talking about collective actions that is taken, both male and female, to strengthen the position of women in the society and fight against gender-related discriminations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussaini, for this enlightenment. We'll be going on a short break now, and then we'll also come back very soon to continue the discussion on creating safe spaces for women in the workplace. See you.
Welcome back from the short break. We've been having a discussion on creating safe space for women in the workplace with our guest for today, Dr. Hussaini Abdu. So, sir, we'll just continue from where we stopped with the question. So what do you think can be done to improve safe spaces for women at the workplace?
I think workplace safe space is very important, but it's even more important in even other platforms. Whether it's political parties, whether it's government offices, anywhere you have both men and women relating, it is important to have a safe space for them. Because if you don't create a safe space for women, you end up seeing some of those structural issues that defines our society affecting them in such locations, even our schools or universities and all that. You check the system in the university system, women don't have space. One of the major issues you have there is about sexual harassment and exploitation. It's huge. So even in the student union movement, you check there, it's largely led by men. So the only position that you find women occupying is vice president or treasurer. So that's just what they do. So it's important for institutions to set up policies to support women's safe space. There are challenges associated with it. And part of it is the time to actually have this meeting. And then the receptiveness of men to allow those meetings to take place. So if you don't have a policy that requires, that says, like I tries to do, is to say that the moment a woman or a female colleague requests for time to go for safe space, it becomes automatic. Everything stops. That safe space meeting is more important than any other engagement in the office. And then you have to monitor that. And then you need to ensure that if anybody denies any woman or any female colleagues from attending the safe space meeting, it's reported so that we take swift action against such people. And then the outcomes of each of those meetings are properly recorded and shared with the leadership where necessary. The whole idea about safe space is that whatever you say in that space remains there. And that nobody goes out to say, Ijoma said this, or Nkem said this, or Hussaini said that. You don't report that. The details comes up. If there are cases of abuse involved, then they must be strictly investigated and actions taken. I think the whole essence is to create a strong sense of equality for men and women in the workplace. And that because you need to create, because the society is so unequal, it is the workplace cannot guarantee it. until women have their own space, their own voice, articulate their positions, and we are continuously responding to those issues that they are raising.
Okay. So that will take us to the next question. You talked about policy. Do you think there are policies that exist that encourage safe spaces for women in the workplace? Are there any?
No, there are no. You wouldn't find probably national policy or state level policy or a legal framework. You wouldn't find that. But it's a good practice for workplace.
Okay.
And it's been recognized to be one of the major ways that workplaces could actually use to deal with the challenges that women experience.
Okay, so you are implying that a workplace or a corporate institution should have their own policy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that creates a space
Yes.
for women working in that place.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's beautiful. So what do you
And
think?
if it's not created, women should be able to demand for it.
Okay, okay.
And they can demand for it if they have their own self-agency or that voice to say, we need this. And if they are not able to do it, they need to build alliances even with men in ensuring that such spaces are provided. Sometimes we don't take some of those issues very seriously. And you may find, even in that same workplace, that men will begin to feel, sometimes mischievously, of course, feel discriminated. And say, why are we, okay, when are we going to have
space
for men? I had that as the country director in Plan International when I set up the safe space. And you have to shut that down and be very clear that you are not going to tolerate male chauvinism because it's chauvinistic. You just feel, you know that there is no discrimination involved in that, but you just feel that mischief of undermining practically anything that is associated with women. Check the parliament. Once women issues comes up, anywhere, you see how people react, the men react to such things. So you may find that kind of situation even in the workplace. So it means that you must invest in both male and women to create that sense of understanding and appreciation of the necessity for such spaces.
So when we were doing your introduction, we read that we said that you have PhD in political science.
Yes.
And you also told us now that when you were in Plan,
Yes.
you created a safe space for
Yes.
women.
Yes.
So if you're saying that offices should have policies for women, what do you think those policies should contain? Please educate those of us that would want to have that in our own institutions.
Okay, I think this is not just simply about the safe space policy, but general policies in the place, because policies interact differently with different people. So policies are not, they are generally presented to be neutral, but they are not necessarily so. If policies are designed within the framework of the larger practice of the society, it will surely be discriminate against women, even when it is presented as if it is neutral. A policy that is neutral in a very unneutral society then is against the disadvantage in that society. So it therefore means that when we are designing policies, we design policies with that level of gender disaggregation, appreciate how that policy will impact on men and women differently, so that you are able to deal with any issue that could come up that could sound discriminatory to women. But when you are setting up a policy for safe space, I think for me is basically, one, guarantee these women that when they express themselves, the institution will protect them, and that the space is safe. It's called safe space because it's a space where you can express yourself without necessarily facing any negative, or maybe a reprimand or something, that you are sure that when I go here and I speak here, I will be listened to, people will understand me, and I will get the kind of solidarity that I need. So that's what it means. So policies must provide that kind of protection for people there. Number two, the policy must also make sure that that space is also not part of the larger institution or the office hierarchy. Because the risk you have is that when you get to the space, the most senior woman in the office who is part of that space could claim it.
Yes.
And begin to show leadership. You understand? And therefore, what that means is that you have transferred that institutional hierarchy that you have in that office into the space. And that's not good for the space. Yeah. So what that means is that the junior ones among the women will probably not get the voice. Yes. Do you understand? So you must be able to, the policy must provide that level of, a level playing field for all women in the space. Okay. And in some occasions, and some people try to even ensure that very senior women are not part of it. Well, for me, I prefer it to be that open, and that the senior people must recognize that that is not an extension of their office. Yes. So like what we did in planning those is to ensure that the leadership or the coordinating leadership of the space is done by people who are not senior.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so you can find, this is a space you have directors in, but you find an ordinary officer is the one leading the directors. Yeah. It creates a certain level of confidence on those people. Yeah. It levels the space and show people that, look, this institution is taking this space very seriously.
Okay, so I just want to ask this question before we go. So, you know, this safe space issues, so many institutional organizations, they trivialize it, they don't make it look important. So how do we get the directors, the senior managers to see that this safe space is something that is practicable, that is they can practice, it should be done in the organization? Yeah,
trivialization of women's issues is a common thing, and I did mention that earlier. But I think this whole thing depends on the message from the top. Yes. What does the overall leadership of that organization say? Like for me, what I do is that this safe space reports, all the reports comes directly to me. Okay. There is no intermediary. So the coordinators of the space, actually leadership, can have access to me. And when anything comes up in relation to women, it comes to me and I take it to the management where necessary. And where I need to take swift and quick decision on, I do that. So leadership, that message from the top is the most important thing in dealing with in managing safe space. Okay. If the top leadership did not prioritize it and it's not treating it or trivializing it, then the same thing will permeate down. Okay. So, and then trivialities, when things come up and people make some of those spontaneous, casual statements that is a bit dismissive of those things, you cut it short. Yeah. And you must be very decisive about it and show that that institution or that office will not tolerate such things. And when you do that, over a period of time, people get to understand. Yes. They get to understand. And I also remember what I did in ActionAid. Then it wasn't safe space per se, but it was gender space, which was like a gender forum. So gender forum was a forum of both male and female colleagues meeting regularly to discuss intergender relations. You know, and what are the problems, what are the challenges, and how can we guarantee equality? It works. It also works, and I don't know whether they've continued that in ActionAid, but I know I had that when I was the country director, where you have a gender forum. So on Fridays, once in a month, you have male and female meeting and discussing gender issues. Sometimes we get people who are very knowledgeable in different themes on gender to come and speak to us on those issues, and it also helps.
Of course.
Yeah. So even when you have that space, and you also have a forum like that where male and female can be able to discuss their issues, it also helps in educating people and creating that atmosphere of equality.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussaini, again, for this wonderful discussion on creating safe spaces for women in the workplace. So from what he said earlier, I could get that having a safe space for women is important, and it's also good if women don't make it discriminatory, it's not a thing of class or hierarchy in the organization. And he also mentioned that it plays a part in empowerment of women since it gives them voice. So Ijoma, I don't know if you have other things to add.
Yeah, just to add that it's best practice for all organization, institutions to understand what safe space means, and it's also very important for directors or top senior management officers to ensure that it is not being trivialized. They work on it to ensure that it's prioritized in each organization. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
I will continue to thank you for I know I learned a lot from this topic. And thank you very much, our viewers, for taking our time today to listen to us. And we'll see you again next week to discuss another interesting topic. See you next week. Bye.